A bit of a hybrid video, this one, and the pun is intentional because I was going to talk about this Jaguar advert here, but I'm going to reserve that for my Black Belt Secrets channel, link below. Hop over there and subscribe. That will probably go live later today. But it did prompt me to talk about car issues in general and a personal story of mine, and one of the real difficulties that clients of mine regularly have to do with cars and what you can do about them. Now, my personal story first. I had a Jaguar, hence the prompt to talk about this little story, and it developed an electrical fault. Now, it wasn't new when I bought it, but it was relatively new, and relatively quickly it developed this electrical fault which was draining the battery, and it was draining the battery to a degree that I couldn't start the car. It was just completely dead. So in the end I had to have this little routine of disconnecting the battery when I arrived at my destination. It was in the boot, so I had to use the alternative opening for the boot, use the manual key, open the boot, disconnect the battery so that it wouldn't drain the battery and I'd be left stranded every time I went anywhere. Obviously, I'd reconnect it before I'd start the car and then go off again. So that was a bit of a pain. So I went to the Jaguar dealer to say, look, this is a problem here. I don't know what's causing this to drain. Obviously, there's a lot going on under the bonnet and throughout the car that I couldn't fix myself. What's the problem? How do I fix it? And what will you charge me to sort it out? Their response, as you can well imagine, was, well, we don't know what the problem is. We would have to look for what the problem is, and we're going to charge you, I think it was in the region of 120 or 140 pounds an hour plus VAT for diagnostic labour fees to search for this problem. And I said, well, how much is that going to cost overall? Because I don't want an endless bill for you searching for this problem. And obviously they didn't and probably couldn't give me an estimate as to how long it was going to take to find this problem, but they were going to charge me every hour thereafter. So obviously I didn't do that. I was repeatedly disconnecting the battery on arrival to my destination for a good while afterwards, until I found one garage which did agree to take the car in and say, we'll be fair to you, we'll just charge you a lump fee when we find the problem and fix the problem, and you can have the car back. Now, that vehicle was in the garage for so long that I almost forgot about it, and so eventually they did find the problem. It was a wire that had shorted underneath the driver's seat somewhere, and it was just basically shorting out and therefore draining the battery. So they replaced that bit of wire, not before taking the car apart pretty much, because they had it for so long. And they charged me thousands to actually put that right. But at least it was, I suppose, a fair amount in the grand scheme of things, because there was no guarantee. That's the other thing Jaguar said. There was no guarantee that they would find the problem, having charged me however many tens of hours at 100 and whatever it was pounds an hour plus the VAT. So why am I telling you this story? Because so many of my clients have had these types of issues with very expensive cars. It's not even mid-range or budget cars that they have these problems with. They have these problems with very expensive cars. Now, when you buy a car, you get certain rights under the Consumer Rights Act if you've bought it from a dealer or someone who's in the trade of selling cars, and you get a short-term right to reject. And that short-term right to reject is within 30 days, and that is if it doesn't meet the minimum requirements for the contract, which is that it's got to be of satisfactory quality, it's got to be fit for purpose. If it's brand new, it should be free of defects and things like that. Now, the reason for this video, I'm not going to bore you with the law, but what I will say is one of the biggest pitfalls that so many clients have had is that they, even with a brand new car, they have a problem with it, and then therefore they just decide either to put up with it for a period of time, in which case they lose this short-term right to reject, and then they're into the 30 days to 6 months bracket, whereby if there's a problem with it, the dealer has to prove that it was not there at the beginning, and after that first 6 months you have to prove that it was there at the beginning. But more about that in a moment. But they leave it for a while, so they get outside of this first 30-day rejection period, which would be far easier to reject the vehicle. Now, I'm not saying that dealers routinely accept rejection of a vehicle. In fact, in my experience, they routinely don't. They routinely will try to either argue with you or try to delay you and try to put it right and things like that. But here's a little trick, because one thing dealers don't seem to understand, and in my experience some lawyers, dare I say it, didn't seem to understand, is that if the dealer has tried to repair the vehicle, let's say you've taken it back on day 15 and they've kept the vehicle for 3 months and still not managed to fix the vehicle. And then you go to a lawyer and the lawyer says to you that you've got this short-term right to reject. You go back to the dealer. The dealer has very often in that situation said, sorry, you're outside of the 30-day rejection period, therefore you can't reject the vehicle. But that is not true, because under the Consumer Rights Act, when you agree for the vehicle or whatever else to be repaired, and there is a waiting period that you are waiting for this either to be replaced or repaired, this rejection period is put on hold. And this is a great little nugget for you to take to a dealer under Section 22, which deals with the time limit for the short-term right to reject, which is this first 30 days. And under subsection 6, it says, if you, the consumer, request or agree to the repair or the replacement of goods, the periods mentioned in subsection 3 and 4, which is this short-term right to reject period, this first 30 days, it stops running for the length of the waiting period. So walking that through, let's say you bought a brand new car or a second-hand car, it doesn't matter really, but you've bought a vehicle. On day 10, 15 or whatever, within the first 30 days, you go back to the dealer, you say, here's a problem, it's not good enough, it's leaking water into the cabin or whatever it might be, and it doesn't conform to the contract because it's not of satisfactory quality, or there's an engine problem, therefore it's not of satisfactory quality or whatever. They say, okay, sorry about that, we'll try to repair it. They keep the car for 2 months. So you're now 2 months and 15 days from the date you bought it. Now, when you go back and they've tried to repair it, let's say it's still leaking or the engine's still got a malfunction light and it's still not quite right. They might then say to you, well, sorry, you are out of this first 30 days. You cannot reject the vehicle. You can then print a copy of this and take it into them and say, well, under Section 22, subsection 6, because I agreed to the repair, this period, this short-term right to reject period, this first 30 days, stops running for the length of the waiting period. So if you're on day 15 when you agree to the repair, they then take 2 months. You get it back and it's still not right. The day after, you are on day 16 of your 30-day short-term right to reject period. But a lot of dealers don't understand this. And even some lawyers representing those dealers, in my experience, didn't understand that. They reiterated the point that the 30-day short-term right to reject had expired, when in fact that's not the case. If this went to court, the court would obviously apply the Consumer Rights Act. And even then, I would strongly suggest that whoever's presenting the case, whether it's the person themselves or the lawyer in charge of it, present this bit to the court. Because a judge is not a legal library. The judge doesn't know every single bit of law. And if this one snippet of law escapes the judge, then it's really important to bring that to the attention of the court so that that can be applied in a case like this. And so this video from Jaguar prompted me because it reminded me that I had such a problem with my Jaguar years ago. As it happens, because of my experience, both with the car and the fault and the dealer's response, etc., I would be really hesitant to buy another Jaguar. But such as it is, that was my experience. This is the experience of many of my clients when they've had problems with vehicles. Even in the case of brand new vehicles, and this has happened with multiple brands, the dealers first and foremost have rebutted that there's a problem in the first place, or they've tried to repair it and failed to repair it and still refused to accept the rejection of the vehicle, wording to the effect of this doesn't meet the criteria for rejection of the vehicle under our terms and conditions, which is all fluff and nonsense because the law is clear. You have a short-term right to reject. If it doesn't conform to the contract, for example, it is not of satisfactory quality, it's not fit for purpose, or if it's brand new, it's not free of defects and such like. One situation I had, for example, was where a vehicle was supposed to be brand new, and for some reason or another, it was involved in a collision within the factory and had been repaired. On inspection, the client looked at the vehicle and questioned why the paintwork in a certain area wasn't quite right. And the response was that that must have been from the repair and that they'll get it resprayed. Obviously, then the client said, what do you mean repair? This was a brand new vehicle. And they said, oh no, it's been repaired because there was an incident in the workshop or whatever. And in that case, the consumer wanted to reject the vehicle there and then, even without driving it away, because it had already been involved in a collision. And again, even then, the dealer tried to uphold their position and refused to accept the rejection of the vehicle. Obviously, in the end, they did, because obviously there's no way a court was going to accept that, because there is no way a court was going to uphold the dealer's position that the consumers should accept a vehicle that's been repaired even before they took delivery of the vehicle. It just does not sit with consumer law. And the other thing you should bear in mind is the protection that you get if you've paid for any of your vehicle with a form of credit. This is both Section 75 and 75A of the Consumer Credit Act. Now, this only applies in terms of Section 75 if the purchase price is over £100 but does not exceed £30,000. What Section 75 does, and so you could even pay 1 penny or £1 or whatever on your credit card, that then allows you to have a like claim against the finance provider as well as the dealer that sold the vehicle. Section 75A applies where it is more than £30,000 but does not exceed £60,260. I'm not sure where that figure came from, but it cannot exceed that figure. And that gives you an alternative to go after the credit company, and that applies where there is a linked credit agreement with the supply of the goods under the contract. Now, the conditions to be satisfied is that either the supplier cannot be traced, the debtor has contacted the supplier but the supplier has not responded, the supplier is insolvent, or the debtor has taken reasonable steps to pursue the claim against the supplier but has not obtained a satisfactory outcome. But that does not need to include litigation. So you don't have to sue them in order to go after the credit company. So those are some things I think you should bear in mind. I've done a few videos about that before. A long, I think 30 or 40-minute podcast talking about all these same issues. I will endeavor to remember to link that below. Remind me if I don't. And I hope that's of some use to you. But this just reminded me of my little story with Jaguar and the problems that we have with these things. So I hope that's of some use to you. Do check out my secrets channel linked below, where I am going to go through this video because I almost talked about it here, but then I thought it really does belong on secrets. So hop over there and I'll see you there.